Welcome to The Road Less Traveled with Tiffany Rosenbaum. This podcast is about sharing the success and failure of entrepreneurs. Join in and learn from others' mistakes so you don't have to go through the same hardships in business. Now let's welcome your host, business coach, real estate investor, and proud wife and mom, Tiffany Rosenbaum.
Welcome to another episode of The Road Less Travel. We are doing something completely off the cuff today. I have Daniel Rosenbaum here, and we are talking about marriage and entrepreneurship. And as I did research, and I'm really excited to have you here because, you know, it's not very often that you have a couple that starts businesses, raise kids, and stays together. So thanks for being here today, Daniel.
Con mucho gusto. It's my pleasure to be here, Tiffany. Thank you for having me.
You're going to get nothing but real and raw from us. So we were definitely two different personalities. But when I was going through statistics, and it was very interesting to me. Did you know that a University of California analyzed
Keep going, you're
an
fine.
analysis of 3,900 married business owners found that nearly 30% of entrepreneurs have divorced. Roughly double the 10 to 15% rate of non-entrepreneurs in the same age bracket. What it shows is entrepreneurship and married couples have a more likelihood of divorce. Now that's what I want to bring into, because being a business owner and married at the same time is not always easy. And I'm going to tell you right now, I want you to be real and raw of our struggles, and let's open up about it. You know, why don't you go back from when we really first started?
So let me understand that stat. Is 39% of entrepreneurs get divorced, or 39% more?
30% of entrepreneurs in that area. It was 10 to 15% of the case study that they did. 10 to 15% of entrepreneurs are more likely to get divorced than someone that's not an entrepreneur.
Okay, so rephrased, entrepreneurs are 10 to 15% more likely to get divorced than if you're not an entrepreneur.
Yes.
Gotcha. Cool.
Okay, so I wanted to open up about that. I want to open up what made being a business owner, marrying me, because we started entrepreneurship pretty young in our marriage. It was 2010. Well, really before that, but the first business didn't go well. But what was the big struggle for us in your mind?
For me, it was more about the uncertainty of the future and the, instability, not instability, but just uncertainty. I think for me was the biggest struggle of, having this desire to look forward and be like, hey, let's build a successful life together. And it's the fear of the unknown. Like, how is it going to turn out? Like, yeah, you have this target on the horizon. You have this target of, this is where we want to go. We want to build a successful, family life together, career, and just not seeing the future, not seeing, today where we are today, looking back when we first got married in 2007, it was just a long shot. Like, yeah, we want to make a lot of money. We want to, have success. We want to have kids. We want to have a family. And, I think part of it was just having this unspoken target of what success looks like, and then just not seeing where that, what are the stepping stones to get there, and what characteristics.
You said something, unspoken expectations of what success looks like, and I think that is something really I want to dive into that real quick, because your expectation of success and my expectation of success, I would say, were very different when we got married. Can you?
Oh, it's
agree?
evolved. It's evolved completely, and it's evolving today as we've as we're at different milestones or achievements we've had in our career. Yeah, it's something that you should look at or analyze and think about. But yeah, it's definitely, and it can definitely vary for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's something that it can make a struggle in the relationship. When we first got started, our 2009, when we moved to Arizona, we had no money. Oh my gosh, we were knocking doors, and I remember crying, and my stress level went way high. And you had the positive outlook of, oh, everything will be fine. And I was like, I was inside dying. And our two personalities, when that went on, I think that was hard, because you were like, oh, it'll be fine, not a big deal. And I'm like, We have no food in the fridge.
We had our early struggles for sure, and that was part of the struggle early on. Yeah. And I think you bring up unmet expectations or just differing expectations. I think that's part of, just a good rule of thumb, whether it's in customer service or in entrepreneurship and business or in a relationship. It's applicable across the board of, hey, I expected something or you expected something, and if I don't meet that expectation or you don't meet that expectation, it causes what? Frustration, anxiety, stress. Like, oh, wait, this isn't working out because I thought you were going to do that. And I think part of that is just, coming together on expectations, coming together on where we're going and aligning, being in alignment. I think that's a huge key for success in relationships, success in entrepreneurship, of getting on the same page of where you want to go and what you want to build together. And I think you're right. Looking back when we were first married and then when we were starting out, we did our student card discount card back in the day. Savvy student card back in the day.
That.
And door knocking and then trying to get good groups to go sell it and earning money and earning a percentage off of that. And it was definitely, things were up in the air. It was kind of up in the air. It wasn't consistent. And when we got into real estate, things changed completely.
Go back a little bit though, when we were struggling with Savvy Student Card and before we got into real estate, what was going through your mind? Do you remember?
What was going through my mind is, again, there was some fear and doubts and uncertainty for sure. At the same time, I did want to maintain a positive outlook. I wanted to look at, hey, I'm not sure how we're going to get there. Not sure how we're going to, provide.
We weren't
pay the bills.
How
are we going to pay the bills? How are we going to survive, basically? Yeah. But I think a huge part of this led to our own success is determination and going after it and not sitting idle, not twiddling our thumbs and having a very solid work ethic. Both you and I have shared that in terms of, hey, rolling up our sleeves and going out to work. And that's and being determined of making it a success, one way or the other.
I think one of the low points for me in that time, though, is when my brother came up to me. They were in town for Thanksgiving because we couldn't travel.
2009? That was
2009.
That was 2009. That was right when the year we moved down from Utah.
Yeah, and he came up to me and said, hey, let's all pitch in and buy pizza for the kids. And I couldn't hold it back at that point. I started bawling. He was like, what's wrong? And I was like, I don't have money for pizza. And he was like, what? Because we had made things look like we were okay. And he was like, and he just saw me bawl and he just put his arms around me and he said, Tiff, things will be okay. And I said, I don't know if they will be. And I think in that time, I think my foundation was very shaky. I did not know how we were going to get out. I knew I could work hard. I knew I could knock doors. But I did not know how I was going to get out or how we were going to get out. And I know the number one reason for a fault in relationships or divorce is money. And we had talked about that, and I remember, but we both did have a work ethic, and we were like, hey, we'll roll up our sleeves, and and we'll get working at it. Knowing this, though, what was one of the hardest things when we became entrepreneurs together, though? What, like, in your mind, how I do things that you were like, oh, that's frustrating? And I know there's some. Actually, I know there's a lot. You don't want me to nitpick about idiosyncrasies? You want me to nitpick little things? Yes, about my entrepreneurship. Because I think that's in any relationship, and I think that's real and raw. I would say, I can tell you right off the bat, one of them is I get hyper-focused. And when I get hyper-focused, someone can come by my office and I am like hyper-focused and I won't even notice you say hi. And I know that's a very big pet peeve of yours.
Yeah, that's one of the things. I mean, it's no different from just hiring other people or team members. And when we first started in real estate, there'd be times where, coming down to just, hey, if there's an error or a typo or something, I'd be like, hey, like, you need to double check your work and you need to spell things right. Like little stuff like that. Yeah. It's no different of, hey, well, you're going to phrase it differently or like, and there's just different ways of doing it. No different if when you expand and you delegate things to team members, you're going to, they're not going to do the job exactly how you're going to do it. And part of that is just reaching out and delegating. And I'm not saying, in terms of our relationship, but in our relationship, if I would look at an email back to a client or an owner and then I'd be like, well, why are you phrasing it this way? Just down to being nitpicky. But yeah, in terms of you being hyper-focused, there's times, and that hasn't changed in terms of like, meaning like if I come in and you're in the middle of either whatever you're doing, if you're in the middle of an email or you're in the middle of doing something work-related, many times I could speak and you can be like block like a complete brick wall, like, hey, I'm not here.
Yeah.
And that can be irritating. I'm like, hey, Tiffany, can I get your attention?
Yeah.
And I've become accustomed to it to some degree, and I choose not to be resentful over that because you are focused, and so later when you take a break, you'll be available.
That is one of my shortcomings.
You're unavailable. You're temporarily indisposed, but that happens. But
one thing we've done to help our relationship, though, we've talked about that. Like we've talked about our expectations and discussion. Like one thing that you came down, we sat down and we talked about it because I'm very hyper focused. You can disconnect very easily with the family. Like you do such a good job of that. And we had sat down and you said, hey Tiff, when I come home or if I, come in your office and I name you, can you turn and acknowledge me? And so, yes, I had to work on that. I'm still working on it. I'm not perfect at it. But I think that's one of the best things is one thing that you do really, really well is that you're like, hey, let's talk about this. Let's sit down and see if there's a way we can get better at this together instead of just letting something fester. I would say that is one thing that you're incredibly good at that I'm not good at.
Oh, thank you.
But it's true.
Yeah,
I think
it's something that we've worked at, but there's something. Yeah, it's something we've made effort on talking, and you've done the same thing where you've given me feedback and said, hey, you're not as good as on certain things. We all have weaknesses, right? That's part of life. We've all been given weaknesses. We've all been given strengths, and when we can talk about things that, hey, this is something that we could work on or that would improve, then you have an opportunity to change. And if you don't talk about it, and you don't set expectations, and there's no opportunity or no room for growth in the relationship and in the marriage. And I think we've been able to maintain a healthy, marriage. We've had, of course, our ups and downs, and our marriage is far from perfect, but we've been able to build mutual respect, and we've been able to compromise on things and develop and grow quite a bit because of those things.
Yeah, but I think I think the real and raw here, though, is a question that the viewers would have is, but how do you get mad at each other at work and not go home and be mad at each other? Because you're going to disagree at work because that's the only way that the business can go forward. And how do you not take that home and not want to kill each other? Because I think that's the issue, right? Like, how do you make sure that when you're at work, it's at work, and when it's at home, it's home? And I don't think we've always been perfect at that. But I think we work on it. And I would say the number one time we probably get real frustrated with you when we jump in each other's lanes. And we have to tell each other, get out of my freaking lane or get out of your lane and go to your lane so we can do what we do. I think that's the biggest issue. Same thing at home, same thing in anything with relationships. I think the most important thing is to stay in your lane.
I think that's been key. For sure, I'm just silencing my watch because things are getting blown up. Not blown up, but like just the alerts on our kids, like Live 360 and other alerts. I'm like, I'm going to silence my watch because it's buzzing up, and I'm like, it's so distracting to me.
Okay, as you can tell, I'm going to say this real quick.
I don't
as
even
you can
want
tell,
that.
Daniel can jump real easy. He can jump all across. It's not a bad thing. It's actually one of his superpowers in a lot of things. But I'm very hyper-focused. I would say that is something in our relationship we've had to work on as well. Like, you can jump, and I'm like, well, I like to be on one thing and then move and not jump a lot.
Yeah, there's some tendency, and I'm prone to jump or to be, have a little bit of squirrel or ADD here and there, for sure. Yeah. But no, I think you're bringing up, staying in each other's lanes. I think that was key to having success in terms of, you brought up a couple things of staying in your lanes and also not taking it home, and we can hash things out and disagree. And I think it's a matter of, compromise. It's also a matter of having mutual respect for each other, even though we don't we can get mad about things that are really petty.
Yeah.
Like down to, hey, this is the policy, or this is the approach on a lease, or like, what do we, certain things. And when you step back and you pause, you're like, okay, this is not, it's not a 10 out of 10 of importance or priority. It's more like maybe a 4 or 5. It's not completely going to make or break, the business. And I think so many things that are like that in your relationship too, in terms of like, is it really that important, or is it that much of a deal breaker? And there's boundaries, right? I mean, for a healthy relationship, you've got to be able to, for a relationship to be proved and tested, you got to have trust, and and if you are being, untrustworthy, or, you don't have that trust built up, then of course that's going to be shaky ground, right? But I think as long as you've built that trust up and you've been able to prove each other, and you've been able to hash out things in a respectful manner.
You make it all sound roses. We can get heated.
We can get heated, yeah. But again, it's a matter of
coming back,
and also having respect for each other. And it's also, I think, one of the keys to a healthy relationship and a healthy entrepreneurship is compromise. There's times where to you it's not the most important thing, and there's times where it's not the most important thing to me. And I think, when we were dating back then, or even maybe as part of our early marriage, maybe it was your mom or dad or one of your parents or somebody that I'd heard saying, hey, you can kind of put it rate it, right? Put a measurable on it and say, hey, how important is this on a scale of 1 to 10? Is it a 10 or is it a 9? Is it a 5? And if you come back and you measure it and you rate it, then you can kind of talk it out too and be like, hey, it's a 7 or 8 to you and it's really a 3 or 4 to me, then just let it go. And that's compromise. I think it'll build resentment if you feel dominated all the time, or you feel like you're not being listened to, you're not heard, you're not being cared for, that kind of stuff. That of course is going to build up resentment, and then it can cause, it could lead to, bad relationship or getting divorced. Yeah. But I think every day you're choosing each other despite their weaknesses, despite their faults, despite the unmet expectations.
Yeah, you said something that we leave it at work. I think that's a false notion. We don't leave it at work. You'll see us working on Saturdays. You were working yesterday. I think work is what it is when you're an entrepreneur. I mean, yeah, we try to do fun things with our kids, but I was talking to Brad Levitt the other day on his podcast. I said, it's like you're throwing up glass balls, and you got to pick which one can't break, right, that day. And sometimes it's going to be work. Sometimes it's going to be the kids. Sometimes it's going to be the husband. Which one can't break in the moment and which one needs you most. And I think understanding that's incredibly important, and having the spouse understand that, and making sure that we're all on the same page, which is a continual learning process, I think.
Well, that analogy came from one of my professors in college that I shared with you over the years. And yes, I love that one, which is, hey, you're constantly juggling, right? You're constantly juggling. You're always juggling. And you've got to figure out when you're juggling, if you're going to drop a ball, which balls are going to be the glass balls you don't want to break, and which ones are the rubber balls that are just, they're going to come back and bounce back. And that's part of the key to life, is figuring out, as you're juggling all the different things that are on our plates in life, between family, relationships, careers, your goals, everything else, which ones do you really want to make sure you're not going to break? Because obviously if you break the glass ball, shatters, it's going to be a lot harder to repair than the rubber ones that are going to bounce back and they'll be there tomorrow. You're always going to have work. You're always going to do things, right? So those are key things that are important. Going back to the whole boundary thing, though, in terms of like leaving it at work or not, there was times, though, before we got an office, before we were, growing and expanding our business, we worked from home.
Oh, man, yeah.
And there was no boundaries. There were no boundaries. In fact, we worked for 2 or 3 years with having team members. We had 2 or 3 team members in our home office. Mm-hmm. And that was a huge thing where, have boundaries. We actually set some rules back in like 2014 or 15 before we went and got an office of, hey, we've got to stop talking business, talking, work after 7 o'clock. We actually made a rule. You remember this? It was over 10 years ago.
We were sitting in the bathtub talking about it. I remember exactly the house. I remember because we were talking and we both looked at each other and go,
why are we talking business?
All we talk is business. Yes. We need to be careful about this.
It became overwhelming and became, very much just hyper-focused on work, and very much, not about us, a relationship, because again, we're sitting here, sharing a moment and we're like talking work. Like it didn't lead to any, being, romantic or anything else about it. So it was just one of those things. And at that point we were like, we got to have some rules. And then we thought about how ridiculous it was, how much we were working. And we were like, hey, we're going to say a rule of after 7 o'clock. And we were putting the kids to bed at 7. Our kids were young, and we used to have the kids in bed at 7. And then that's when we're like taking a bath. We're like, we're going to stop talking work after 7 o'clock. We actually made a rule.
Yeah, we weren't perfect at it. But what we did is we tried. And I think the most important thing is we tried to take moments where it wasn't work. I think it also has, when you're building a business, I think you also have a stair steps. Sometimes you have to be very hyper focused and making sure you take a date night or you reconnect every week to make sure you come back together. Because there's sometimes the business is going to require more, and there's sometimes it's going to require less. It just depends where you're at in the phase. And I think open communication and expectations are important with the spouse to make sure we always align and we always are loyal to each other.
There's no substitute, no doubt. There's no substitute for hard work, no doubt. And there's times where it's going to feel very, very out of balance, and that's okay. And it's going to, as you point out, that's a great point. The business will require more of you and more of your time and energy and resources. But if if you continue that forever, of course you're going to sacrifice your health or your well-being or your mental health. You bring up stats on divorce. There's definitely strong stats, about just as an entrepreneur, you have a higher likelihood of having some mental illness.
You do.
You really do.
You have higher likelihood of divorce,
higher anxiety,
mental illness.
You do because of the workload and other things, and that's okay. It's just part of the risk involved. But anyway, it's
like for instance, last year I would say was another stair step that took a lot from us. There were multiple mornings that we got up at 2 a.m. There were multiple Saturdays that we worked all day long. There were multiple Sundays that we worked all day long because we had things on the table that had to be done.
Yeah.
I can probably count on one hand how many days we took off last year. And I don't think, that's what I think people don't see. And I think at the end of the day, the strain that it can have on our relationship, and I can say this, if I was married to anybody else, I probably wouldn't be married. Because you're the loyal one and you're the one that continues to come back and makes us sit down and discuss and see where we're at and continue to rate our marriage and continue to go, hey, where are we at? Yes, we're building this, but how do we make sure we come back together? And I think that's important. I think, who was it? I can see his face, but he says every week he would have a interview with not interview, but a sit down with his wife or spouse and make sure that they rated how they were doing. And you do really good at this. You ask, hey, what's one thing that I'm doing that you like? What's one thing, how did I support you this week? And I think that's been a big thing for our relationship to make sure we continue growing together instead of growing apart.
Oh, it's been huge for sure. And I think those are the moments when you it's our goal to, to go out every week. And it doesn't look the same every time. Sometimes it's going out to get dinner. Sometimes it's going and playing pickleball, or it's going out on activity, or it's going on a bike ride, or trying a new place. But when you're able to connect and spend time, with your spouse, and nothing else is more important than that. But that gives you the time to go and to feel each other, hear each other out, and say, hey, how have I shown up for you? How have I, how is this working out for you? How's your week? And what do we need to work on? And really express those feelings and really open up and become vulnerable to each other.
When did you decide that was important? Like when we were going through this entrepreneurial journey and we're married and we're going through the struggle, when did you decide like, hey, I have to put more in here to make sure we don't get divorced?
When the struggles of building your business and your career feel overwhelmed, or you're just it's the efforts that you've put in are so overwhelming, where you feel like, hey, something's going to break on the other side, or something's being sacrificed too much. And I just, I knew it's important to, have a strong relationship. And so it's something we've known about for a long time, but it's a matter of, it's easier, like most things in life, it's easier said than done. And so being consistent and actually going out, and having 3 or 4 date nights in a month, of course there's some weeks that we'll fail at it, or that it doesn't go to plan because of something happened or kid's sick or whatever else. But as we've made an effort towards doing that and being consistent on a weekly date, it's very important. But I think, I realized your relationship or your business or something's going to struggle if you don't spend time and energy and attention on it. If you're not putting attention and effort on it, then of course it's going to hurt. So, and also I was going to say, when it becomes important too, when you know that, hey, there's resentment building, or like we're so far off, or you haven't connected, or you're so distant. Those are the struggles that people, or you feel lonely. You're like, well, hey, I'm married, but I feel lonely because we haven't connected.
Yeah, there's been times in our relationship that we didn't talk for days. There's been times that I think, like when you were talking about how we were building the business and it was like everything was going towards that. And then you realize something's going to break on the other side unless we do something or change something. And I think that's important for people to hear, because I think people can, from the outside, can look in and go, hey, everything looks perfect. And I think as you are an entrepreneur, a spouse, a dad or a mom, I think there's so many balls being juggled that it's an everyday trying to just show up. And I don't think any day is perfect. And I think that's what people need to realize. You're stacking days and you're just the little moments, the little bitty moments that you can say one word or one hug or one smile. I think that's incredibly important. I know there's multiple mornings that I will make sure before I leave the house. Sometimes most of the time I leave before the kids leave, actually. And so I will make sure I go hug each one of them and say goodbye and say, hey, I love you. And then I get home after them a lot of times. And so I go up and I try to hug. I think those little bitty things for a spouse or a child or anything is very important to do to make sure those little moments are met. Quality over quantity is what, when you're an entrepreneur, I would say is very important.
Those little things add up, and they show some love and affection, and they show how you can care for your kids and your spouse for sure. So,
can you tell a story of one of your low points as an entrepreneur and a spouse in our marriage?
Low point?
Low points, and then I'm going to ask for a high point.
Well, how much time do you got? We got a lot of low points.
It's actually true,
No,
but I think it's a roller coaster, right? And it's a journey. It's not a destination.
No, I mean we've had our struggles, and I think some low points have been met when we've had the wrong person on our team, or that you've had somebody that's very negative to the point of you'd almost call them toxic. And we've had a few times where we've had that in case. That was a low point. It was a low point because it wasn't. They're on our team for a few months, type of thing. Not even quite a year, but they were on our team long enough where it's like, that's negative. It's being around that negative energy. Some of their low points, though, I mean, what comes to mind is when you've made some expensive, mistakes, or your team's made some mistakes where you've written a big check because of it. And those are some low points too, where you've made a mistake and you're like, you can't even fix it, because you can fix it by just, taking ownership of it and saying, hey, our team made a mistake, even though, we delegated to them. And for example, you had a wrong work order that was approved, a wrong turnover bill that cost us $10,000, and it went to the wrong owner, and the wrong owner approved it. That kind of thing. Those are some low points. But I think, I think there's in our career, you have a lot of highs and lows, just like you have a ton of highs and lows. So I mean, those things come to mind with low points. But
how do you think those low points have affected our relationship? Because we've had a lot. I think any entrepreneur has, if you actually get them to speak raw. There's always low points in entrepreneurship.
Well, it gives you some doubt, right? It gives you self-doubt and concerns. You're like, wow, we're so, our team's complete, just like us, we're all human, right? We're all going to be expected to make mistakes. And you're like, some things are just like, wow, you don't understand why they would do certain things. And it's a poor reflection of us or our company when that happens. And I think it really shows, your inner character of how you respond to those moments. And I'll tell you, it takes a lot of integrity to come back and it takes a lot of ownership when you've come back and admitted and said, hey, we made a mistake, and this is how we're going to address it. And how we're going to respond to that is what we're going to do. Are we going to own it? Or are we going to take responsibility for it? Or are we just going to brush it aside?
100%.
So yeah, that's a huge thing. I was going to say there's, we have a strict cancellation policy with our operation with Stunning Stays. And another moment about it was, we had a guest that was set. They booked it way in advance, months in advance. In fact, they booked it, I think I want to say in the summertime, and it was for the week of Christmas. And literally the week before they came in fact, my team member and I even spoke with the mom, because she called in asking about, some details on the reservation about heating the pool and things. And we get a call the week before, and they had a family accident, and the spouse passed away. And we have a very strict, cancellation policy. And at the end of the day, we could have just said, hey, we're keeping the money. We went ahead and canceled the booking, and we did get somebody else to refill the booking, but it was over an $8,000 difference on it. And I even bring this up because that's a huge low point of, hey, and it wasn't fulfilled because it wasn't quite a booking that got replaced with it. We still had a last minute booking for that. But my point being is we went ahead and even though it's not against our cancel, it's it's kind of inhumane to be like, hey, they had a death in the family, and are we going to refund it or not? And we went ahead and refunded it. So it's it takes a matter of really pausing. Hey, what matters? Here you are dealing with an actual, the guest had a death in their family. The mom actually passed away. They booked the specific house for family vacation, so they're going to have the grandparents plus their adult children and their grandkids, and that's what happened. So all I'm saying is, my point being is, who are you in the, when you're tested, when you have a challenge, when you're provoked, or what happens, and who are you going to stand up for? And is it about the lost revenue? It's not about that. It's a matter of, hey, this family's hurting, and, we'll make another buck tomorrow. We'll make more money down the road, doing the right thing. It's a matter of, what kind of integrity you have, and what is right in your mind, and how is it the right thing to do to keep the money? If, in that case, it's like, I don't feel right about it. So
100%. I remember you coming to me and talking to me about that, and just discussing it a little bit, and I remember it weighing on you, but your first reaction was just to give it back. And I think that says a lot about you as an entrepreneur, because you see people, and I think that's important. But what would you say if, someone's going into business together, and husband and wife, what would you tell them? What advice would you give them to be able to get to the end, to have the journey to last and not get divorced?
Well, I mean, general marriage, you're asking me for general marriage counsel.
No, I'm talking about entrepreneurship and marriage. I'm interpreting
it as that.
But what would you tell them? Because there's more couples going into business together.
No, I think you're your biggest cheerleader. You can also hurt each other the most, because, nobody else can hurt each other than your spouse, But I think, it's important to keep it in mind that you're on the same team. Don't keep score against each other. You're not on the opposing teams. You're on the same team. You're all trying to build this together. You should be each other's biggest cheerleaders, biggest support. Those are huge things, Also, in terms of, what would you say to people that are looking to go into business with each other? Just good tips are, define the role of, what you're going to be doing. I think we've had a lot more success when you've said, hey, I'm going to work on this side of the business, you work on that side of the business.
Yeah.
And then when you do that, it's more about, okay, you're not overlapping, you're not doing, you're not having redundancies, you're not overlapping on the work, and it's more efficient.
Yeah.
So that's a really key thing. And I think the other part of it is just, I think it's key to have a weekly date at a minimum. Even if it's only an hour or a couple hours, just to set apart, get away from the business, get away from these. Even when we're on our dates, half the time we talk business.
It's my fault.
It is.
Yeah.
Or we would, all those kind of things.
I know business 24/7. It's bad.
Yeah, and there's times, you just got to you got to set aside time to rest, rejuvenate, recharge the batteries on a regular basis.
I think that what you said is really important. You can go in on a date and you can speak just about your kids. Even if you're not in entrepreneurship together, you got to remember to speak about each other, your goals, your aspirations, what you love, what your hobbies, about each other, not just business, not just kids. Otherwise, you remember when you go back to when you were dating, that's the point of a date, all these different things. So I think it's important, if you're going into entrepreneurship together, make sure you're willing to go through the dark times, because the roller coaster's a lot of spikes, a lot of downturns, a lot of upturns, but you got to make sure you're willing to ride that ride.
No, have the expectation. It's not going to be easy, but I mean, if you're going into entrepreneurship, you shouldn't have that expectation. It takes a lot of hard work. There's no substitute for hard work. There's no substitute for sacrifice and sacrificing your time, your energy, your attention. And so if you're going into it together, be there to strengthen each other, support each other, and to love each other. It's choosing love each other, to love each other. And that's the regular basis, is you got to choose to love each other every day.
You know, it's interesting. You just said you said something that sparked something. You know, the first year, you hear people say it all the time. The first year of marriage is always the hardest, right? Well, the first year of entrepreneurship is always the hardest, but I'd say probably the first 5 years of entrepreneurship. But remember, you have to fight through those down times to get to the rainbow. You gotta be able to understand that it's not always beautiful, but the struggle is what always comes after a rain, a storm, that rainbow, and the beautiful sky.
We were just talking about this at church.
We
were talking about our kids about it in church, about, the good and the bitter, and to be able to choose between it, and how, we were placed here to be tested and approved, and you cannot have the joy if you don't taste the bitter, and you can't have the struggle. You can't grow without the struggle, and your muscles can't grow without the resistance, or without the friction. So like, it goes back to church, goes back to Sunday school.
it goes back to it goes back to the basics, really. The whole point of this is you can be an entrepreneur and be married and stay married. But you have to make sure that you come back together, and it's not just work, it's not just kids, but you go back to the dating side. You remember why you fell in love. You remember when you're mad at each other at work, you got to come home and you got to come back together and put work aside. So it is possible. A lot of people do it, but it takes work just like anything. That's what I would say.
Totally agree.
Awesome.
Totally agree. It takes a lot of work.
It does. Thank you so much for coming on today, Daniel. We appreciate you, and thank you for always being the partner in crime in everything we do.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me here. So thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in today to The Road Less Traveled. If you're organizing an event, workshop, or simply planning something exciting and would like to have Tiffany Rosenbaum join you, or want to have her on your podcast, visit TiffanyMRosenbaum.com and click on Book Tiffany to get started.